Welcome everyone to another edition of The Christian Origins of Nearly Everything. I'm your quick Christian history guy, Jeff Kenny, with my friend Orion here. And today we're going to take a look at the Christian origins of clocks and computers. Of course, that's something of an oversimplification. The fact is, humankind has been constructing time-telling and mathematical devices, including probably the best-known ancient time-tellers, sundials, since the ancient world. But Pope Sylvester II, who lived in the mid-10th to early 11th centuries and began life as a shepherd boy from France named Gerbert, is credited with the invention of the first mechanical clock, as well as an abacus, a counting device considered by many to be the world's first calculator. Now, there are a couple of myths to bust here. First, if you've watched any of our other videos, and I hope you have or will, you know the myth of the so-called Dark Ages as an era of anti-intellectual pure superstition is demonstrably wrong, which is borne out beautifully by the story of Father Gerbert, later Pope Sylvester II. Gerbert in his prime was the leading mathematician and astronomer of his day, having utilized his time watching the flocks at night to master astronomy. He also journeyed to Spain to study very fruitfully with Muslim intellectuals and wound up for a time with a post in the court of King Louis V of France. And by the way, there was peaceful interchange of trade, ideas, and information between Muslims and Christians for some 35 years during this period, though admittedly, we know that didn't last. Due in part to the knowledge he gained during that period of study, Father Gerbert was the first Christian known to teach math using the 9 Arabic numerals and 0. This aided him in developing the abacus counting tool used for mathematics that some today consider the first computer, one of only 4 major innovations in computing between 3000 BC and the invention of the slide rule in the early 17th century. Gerbert, a professor at the cathedral school in Reims, France for many years, was an innovator in many areas of mathematics and astronomy in particular, and performed careful experiments which would foreshadow the scientific method of the future to test his many hypotheses. Father Gerbert constructed a weight-driven clock for a university in the year 996 AD, which is considered the very first mechanical clock in all of history. Father Gerbert was elected Pope in the year 999, taking on the name Sylvester II and serving in that role until his death in 1003 AD. It shouldn't surprise us that much mythology has been made of portraying this great man of science as a strange misnomer in a world completely consumed by ignorance and superstition. While it may be true that some could only conclude his clock was virtually a work of magic, his love of science was not at all unusual for a monk of the Middle Ages, the 10th century, even if he was an unusually gifted teacher, writer, and scholar. Contrary to his scientific prowess getting him in trouble with the Catholic Church, as more modern myth-makers have claimed, Catholic monks and clerics from across Europe came to study with him, setting up science schools in their own areas. Of course, this should come as no surprise to those familiar with the fact that the Church virtually from its inception, and certainly after the fall of the Roman Empire, sought to retain the great store of classical knowledge which had so benefited mankind by meticulously copying down the great classics of literature, science, math, medicine, and more in monasteries, going on to establish the university system we know today, and developing much of the early scientific criteria which has continued to blossom inside and outside the Church ever since. All of this reflects the overarching position of the Church throughout history, that knowledge, the intellect, and pursuit of creativity and study are reflections of man's creation in God's image, and reflect his beauty. So until next time, see what I did there? Next time, this is your quick Christian history guy, Jeff Kenny, with my friend Orion here, encouraging you to click to subscribe and check out more of the Christian origins of nearly everything.